I've been thinking a lot about our country and our nation and a democracy in peril. And I really do believe that we as a nation are at a turning point where we can either seize sort of the highest grounds of our collective aspirations or descend into the sort of the gutters of cultural tradition that are undermining what we hope to be and aspire to be. And so I was being interviewed by Oprah on her own network, and I said that to her very passionately that our nation needs more poets. And she's like, what do you mean by that? And I said, people that can challenge the moral imagination of our community and help us to rise to our higher potential. And I'm very happy that here, days later, since it's aired, I was sitting here and watching just such a poet. So Ra, thank you very much. And I could love to pick up right where Ra left off, not in spoken word or verse, although I can sing if you all would like me to, but this room would clear very, very quickly. But Ra talked about sitting at people's kitchen tables. When I was a law student, I came to Newark as an arrogant young man, thinking I was going to transform the world, and was very lucky to land in a neighborhood. I wanted to move into a neighborhood that had a lot of challenges, so I picked one in answer to Chris Rock's great calling, which he said, why is the most violent street in every city is named for the man that stood for nonviolence? And I moved on to Martin Luther King Boulevard in Newark. And Martin Luther King Boulevard, even back then in the mid-'90s, had amazing sections, towering testimonies to what our city could be and I believe would be. But I moved into a section with a lot of violence and was struck very quickly by the challenges and literally witnessed violence like I had never seen it before, and began to think that my idealism was a few steps ahead of my sanity. As I was living in this one-room boarding home for recovering, owned by a nonprofit that worked with recovering drug addicts, next to a crack house across the street from some high-rises, somebody told me I had to meet the woman who was the tenant president in those buildings, and I remember knocking on her door, still feeling like I was in my John Wayne mode, although hiding that veneer of bravado was hiding some fear and concerns for myself. And I knocked on her door, and I remember she opened the door and she said, "Who are you?" And I'm like, "I'm Cory Booker, little Philly. I'm riding in on my horse, and I'm gonna save this town." And she said, "What do you want?" I said, "Well, I want to help you. I'm living across the street. I'm a Yale law student. Did you hear that? Yale." And she looked at me with sympathetic eyes, knowing that she really needed to rescue me desperately from myself. And I'll never forget, one of the first things she did with me was walk me down. She said, "Follow me," and she walked me down through a courtyard into the street, and literally standing in the middle of the street. And picture this, like a 70-year-old woman who was 5 feet and a smidgen, and me now standing on the yellow line in this big grand boulevard, used to be called High Street in Newark. And she says to me, "Okay, if you really want to help me, first tell me what you see around you." And I go, "What do you mean?" She goes, "Describe what you see." And I did just like she told me. I said, "Well, I see high rises. I see an abandoned building used for drugs." I said, "I see some people that might be drug dealers." And I just described the neighborhood. The more I talked, the more just upset the woman looked. And finally I stopped, and she said, she shook her head, "You could never help me." And she storms away. This little woman starts storming back to the side of the street, and I'm like confused. So I run after her and I grab her from behind. I said, "Ma'am, I don't know what you're talking about." And she wheels around and she looks at me hard and she says, "Boy, you need to understand something, that the world you see outside of you is a reflection of what you have inside of you. And if you're one of those people who only sees problems, darkness, and despair, that's all there's ever gonna be. But if you're one of those stubborn folks who every time you open your eyes, you see hope, opportunity, love, if you see the face of God, then you can be someone who helps me." And she left me there standing on the side of the road, looking at my feet, thinking to myself, "Okay, grasshopper, thus endeth the lesson." And thus began my career in Newark, New Jersey. And what I discovered in Newark was the greatest professors I have in my life. And I had this really weird experience where I would drive from New Haven, from my dorm room in New Haven to Newark, New Jersey, to my apartment in Newark, New Jersey, and I would go up to this woman's room and sit around a kitchen table with mostly African-American women, which Miss Jones, Miss Yancey, Miss Jackson, and others, and they would just conspire. They were this amazing conspiracy of love. These stubborn women who really believed that by the force of their will, the courage and audacity of their love, and the tactics that they used, they could save these buildings. And they did in many ways. They took on a slumlord, Miss Jones. This little woman was taken to court by the slumlord because she punched him in the face. No, that's 100% true. They would conspire about how to keep people in their housing, what to do with their kids. It was an amazing introduction to me to a city that has not failed every day, including today, to amaze me with the strength of their human spirit. Folks who never gave up on the dream of America, and that America could be America to them as well. And so this is really where I stand today. Back then, I was holding on. The metaphor I used to use was I was a prisoner of hope. But now, after many years since that day in the mid-90s, I now use a different metaphor, that I'm hope unhinged. And the reason why I'm hope unhinged is because I now believe in my heart that there's nothing we cannot achieve as a people, as a community. I've proven it time and time again to myself. And that the only challenge we have in America in making this country true to every one of its people is that it's not a matter of can we anymore, it's do we have the collective will. That if you could pull people together to do the things they don't normally do, you're gonna always get results that you don't normally get. And that is the amazing thing for me. I drive down High Street now and I see the transformation that's happening before my eyes. From housing that's going up, for women coming out of drug addiction, to the incredible changes that are being made from that street. It's a great perch to look at the entire city. Newark right now is going through this spectacular moment of transition, and it's so encouraging to my spirit. I see that our city, for the first time after 60 years of population decline, is now for the first time in 60 years going up in population. I see for the first time in 40 years, we see new hotels going up in our downtown. The first time in 20 years, we're building a new office tower that's going up. I was looking at the steel today going up. For the first time in 100 years, we're having the largest parks expansion all over our city, taking neighborhoods. Literally, one of my favorite parks in the city is a 9-acre park, Nat Turner Park, that was a dumping ground that was known before for violence and challenges, is now known for really a celebration to the spirit of our children. We're seeing a doubling in a down housing market at a time that housing dollars are especially from government, is starting to shrink up. A lot of affordable housing is sourced by real estate transfer fees in New Jersey. We've been managed to double the production of affordable housing and do affordable housing not just for people of low income, but people that are often left out of the equation, from chronically homeless folks. We have housing we've built for women who are were victims of domestic violence. Housing for our veterans. We just finished a new veterans housing to really make true on that wonderful song we all sang, and that we can actually be a home of the brave and have places for homeless veterans to actually live. In every area of our city, I'm seeing remarkable change. As of now, from last year, we're 30% or 29% to be exactly down in murder, and the crime rate is again going down significantly in Newark. So I'm now at a point where I feel this sense of emboldened confidence that really comes from a real community of people who don't view sectors as different, but view everybody in this together. And the partnerships that go from tenant presidents to churches and the clergy sector to nonprofits to philanthropists to corporations is creating an amazing mix of opportunity in the city of Newark. And as I stand here before all of you, and there are some of my great friends in this room, I really want to give a bow to John Whitehead, who has just been a real amazing force in my life. And one of my lowest moments after I lost my first campaign, if those of you who like documentaries, there was one done called Street Fight about my first campaign. I got nominated for an Academy Award and lost to this other movie. I think it was named March of the Damn Penguins, I think was the name of it. You can get Morgan Freeman to narrate my morning routine and it'll win an Oscar, for crying out loud. I'm not bitter or anything. But John has been an encouraging force, and right after my loss sent me one of the sweetest notes I'd ever gotten to keep going. And I see some people here who've been working with me in Newark. And in the short, brief time I share with you, I want you all to take on the spirit of Miss Virginia Jones, who I mentioned earlier, and to understand that the role of philanthropy, the role especially of corporate philanthropists, can be game-changing, can be transformational, can take a city that so many people like Newark for years and years and years were disregarding, disrespecting, or just plain dissing, and turn it into one of the more exciting cities of transformation in America that literally is hope on the horizon, that literally is sparking the moral imagination of a nation, and having people say to me as I travel, gosh, if Newark can do it, we can too. And so the role of philanthropy to me is amazing. Almost everything I ticked off as signs of progress. We've had amazing partners in the world of corporate philanthropy. I bumped into a friend from Goldman Sachs here, and they've been amazing. They've been involved in everything from our Teachers Village project, 130 million, actually transforming an entire neighborhood in our downtown. To other aspects of their philanthropy. Panasonic, which is an amazing leader named Joe Taylor, who sat with me in my office for the most interesting conversation. You would think it would be a pitched opportunity for me to sit down with a guy and talk to him about why his company should move. We didn't have bottom line conversations. He said, we're looking at that stuff, but I really came here to talk to you about values, Cory. About the culture of capitalism, about what our philosophy is, and how by being a part of Newark, can we together achieve something that's dramatic, or achieve something that wakes people up to the potential of our city. So all over my city, we're finding strategic partnerships, which I'm going to go into some detail about. But I really also want to mention is probably in many ways the rock of our corporate community, really is one of those institutions that never gave up on Newark. During its worst of days, many cities, many law firms and corporations moved out of Newark. This was a firm that was founded in our city in the late 1800s with this ideal that we could help the common man, that we can be there for them in their times of crisis, that we can be there for families in their times of loss. And that was actually the Prudential Company. Prudential has stayed in our city and has been a towering symbol if its building is a part of our skyline. And what excites me about them is they, like other corporations, and I don't single them out to the detriment of others, but they, like other corporations, have understood that involvement in the community really is at every level of a corporation. Their employees and what they do. I remember when I was a young councilman in my neighborhood, painting rooms in schools with Prudential employees because it's part of their culture that they get out in their community. The difference-making element that their employees make in our city is really remarkable. They may be commuting in, but they've created a culture in which they really are a part of our city. Their philanthropy obviously is incredible, but frankly, their leadership in philanthropy is incredible. I remember when I first became mayor, they pulled together all leaders in philanthropy, and I'll never forget one comment that somebody made when they looked up and they said, wait, this is the first time we all sat together as a group. And I said, wait a minute, here you all are giving millions of dollars and we never talked about coordinating our philanthropy or what the common vision is for our cities. They've served as a philanthropic leader in our city. Their technical expertise has been invaluable to my administration. I often joke that before I became mayor of New Jersey's largest city, the biggest thing I had managed was a staff of 14, and my own apartment and personal finances, and they didn't necessarily speak to great hope for the city. But Prudential and some other great corporations were there right away to say, let us help you build a great team, build a great organization. Let us help you deal with these complicated problems from our expertise and from our perspective. Prudential has shown me that in many different ways that are not immediately viewed, that you can actually be incredible difference makers within cities if you have the right civic partnership. And I know I'm not alone on this. This is a time in America, and I don't mean to be self-serving in this comment, but to me, as I look at the landscape of political leadership in America, I really get a little discouraged, I have to say, when I see the partisanship, the petty partisanship that seems to be breaking out in many levels of government, how it's more about screaming at each other and saying what you're against. But mayoral leadership I love in America, and there's been great mayors that have inspired me for a long time, from Goldsmith to Hickenlooper to even more recently people like Mayor Bloomberg, who gave me my best political advice of my life, which was simply, Cory, before you become a mayor, become a billionaire. It's brilliant advice. John did not give me that advice. John, why? But the truth of the matter is, I found mayors on all sides of the political aisle who do not care about politics, they care about progress. And some of the best urban innovators I've seen, more recently with Rob Emanuel and others, are mayors that say, hey, we've got to get the job done. And under circumstances that mayors 10 or 20 years ago didn't have to deal with, the worst economy of a generation, from governments having to shrink. We've had to literally shrink the size of our government by 25% less employees than when I started with. And what they're finding, those leaders are, and I know this from a recent summit we had for innovative mayors that Mayor Bloomberg called together, is all of them finding that the only way they can really get things done is by finding partners in other sectors, especially in the corporate sectors. And in fact, to find ways to be innovative, to get that, to get government out of its groove, which is not about innovation. It's actually often about just running things, but not about thinking creatively and constructively about how to change paradigms. That often it's people within the corporate sector, within the philanthropic sector, that can help you break out of that mold. And so let me go through just a few examples of ways that our partnerships have created new paradigms within our city. So the first is dealing with this challenge that we have about stimulating economic development. I know in my heart of hearts that New Jersey is an example of planning gone wrong. We fled away from our cities. We created urban sprawl. We fled away from infrastructure. We fled away from those elements of our civic life that were there and ready for the reclamation, and instead created an encroachment into, from environmentally to in other ways, that was not for the best of our state. But now, Newark, New Jersey, and other cities have a story to tell. That we have, Newark, for example, sits on the best transportation superstructure in the northeastern seaboard, the biggest port in the region, one of the busiest airports in the region, all the major rail lines. And we knew we had a way that if we can tell our story, that development should spring up here. In fact, we saw a lot of things that just made no sense, irrationalities. Newark has this big port. Companies, like we talked to Maersk and others, would bring in their goods and services, put them on trucks, drive them out of Newark down to exit 8A on the turnpike, do all their warehousing there. When they finish cutting it up, they put it back on trucks, drive it back up into Newark, New Jersey, and to put them on our rail lines or our air freight example. And it was a waste of time, a waste of money, a waste of energy, a waste of polluting our environment. So we knew we had cases to make that development should be happening in American cities, that urban centers offer a lot to commerce. They can help people save money, they can help protect the environment. In fact, Panasonic told me one of the main reasons they were coming was because of their corporate green value, and by being in an urban center, they actually can create a far greener building. They're going to build a LEED certified building in the city, but also know that from commuting issues to others, Newark was the place to be. And so we needed to start having people to understand and starting to sell this idea that if you build it in Newark, people will come. We looked at our hotels, for example, and saw that we had one of the highest occupancy rates in the New York City region because we had under hotels, but nobody wanted to risk that capital. Nobody wanted to step forward. So one of the biggest things that we found is corporations who would step up and help us to be the lead investors to help fill in those pro forma gaps on these projects and actually get them over the hurdle and get them done. Every major development right now, we've had some corporation who step forward, whether it's in purchasing revenue area bonds at favorable rates, whether it's assigning new market tax credits, whether it's extending lines of credit. All of these things have helped every major project that I brag about in Newark all over the city is getting done because corporations have a vision that if we invest in places like Newark, especially invest in ways that create critical mass, tremendous change will happen. The 2 new hotels have corporations like Prudential involved. I already talked about Teachers Village, this transformative development. If you look at the major institutions from the arena in the city of Newark right now, took major corporate investment and corporate philanthropy. NJPAC, one of the great centers of art and artistic expression in our state, again having corporate investment. Newark, New Jersey is claiming its vision because it has the bridge capital and the involvement from corporations. And now we've proved the thesis. Now actually we've crossed a corner where the momentum now is working in our favor. And I continue to have corporations now reach out to me. I talked to the head of Whole Foods the other day who has a wonderful vision about their company and wants to come to the city of Newark. I've talked to warehouse and distributors. I talked to corporate folks who are looking to locate headquarters who now think of Newark because of all this early work that's been done to begin to help change our perception in the city. But in addition to that, people who have a look at what the barriers are towards job creation and business development, there have been other ways in our city that we've seen tremendous partnerships with our corporations. And one is an example, again, working with local folks like Prudential, just to set up a minority business loan fund to look for companies that may not necessarily be the obvious choices for the traditional banks and lenders, but are still credit worthy. And here in the city of Newark, we set up a $6 million loan fund. We've had over 50 businesses, local, minority, women-run businesses that are now incredible success stories. Many of the people coming right from our city, already the people coming from, in some places, some of our more impacted areas, are becoming successful entrepreneurs, opening up business in and around our arena and capturing the multiplier effect that comes from some of these big major projects. In addition to that, we knew that we had to start doing things that were going to prove that we could shift the paradigm. In fact, I believe government as a whole often does things, and this is a scientific term I learned in my graduate work in political science, government often does things that is stupid. And we're often much more likely to try to invest in the back end when it's far more expensive. And what my administration has been trying to do is to prove the thesis that with proper analysis and proper investment, we could shift statewide or even national public policy to doing more enlightened and intelligent ways of running government. One of the critical ways we found that out is the criminal justice system. We saw that there were many practices in the criminal justice system which not only were far more expensive on the back end, but were grinding up human potential, wasting America's greatest asset, which is its people itself. And we saw ridiculous things coming from stories coming from men and women who were coming home who were just looking for hope and opportunity. And we saw terrible statistics that were chilling to me when we did an analysis of who were the murder victims in Newark. Well, we found out that 85% of the people murdered in our city, this is a shocking statistic to me, 85% of the people that actually murdered, the victims, have been on average arrested 10 times, have been arrested before an average of 10 times. And so these are people that have been recycling through the system over and over again. And in fact, the most dangerous time if you're coming out of prison is your first 6 months, because many people will try to get help and hope, and then they'll hit roadblocks and then go back to trying to deal drugs, often in environments that are not safe, often stepping on the toes of other folks. And that first 6 months is the time that people most get killed when they come out of prison. And so we knew that this was costing society an ungodly amount of money. One gunshot victim in our city cost taxpayers hundreds of thousands of dollars. A non-fatal gunshot wound can cost taxpayers hundreds of thousands of dollars because these guys aren't showing up to our hospitals with health insurance. They show up with need of charity care. They show up in need of critical services, and we end up paying out for them our taxpayer dollars. And then imagine the cost of trying people, the cost of capturing people, and the like. So our corporation partners have done tremendous things. From on the law enforcement side, we're very happy. We have the largest, in fact, at the depth, the nadir of my administration, when 4 people were shot in the back of a school, 4 college kids, so much people stepped forward from the corporate community, philanthropic community, to help us get the largest network of wireless technology in the state of New Jersey, and has helped us push crime down. But the more enlightened thing that corporate philanthropy is helping us do is to explore solutions to these problems to prevent the crimes from happening in the first place. Because ultimately, one person shot in Chicago, in Oakland, in Newark is a tragedy, but it's not the problem itself. It is a symbol, it is a sign of the problem, but not the problem itself. And so we've done some innovative things, thanks to incredible philanthropists, one of which we honored right in this next door last night, which was figuring out ways to make strategic investments that can prove the theory that if you help people on the front end, they won't get in trouble on the back end when it's far more expensive. And I'll give you a few examples. The law firm community in our city came together and we said, you know, look, these guys are coming out of, and some law firms and some corporation councils came together and said, look, help these guys come out with simple administrative law complications that if we help them solve those, they would actually be viable actors within our economic community and not prone to going back to prison. So we created the nation's first ever pro bono legal service project for ex-offenders coming out of prison called the Reentry Legal Services, or RELESE, Release. That's helped now thousands of men and women, and the associates who are involved in this have given me feedback that's amazing that I see. Just expunging a record, getting somebody a driver's license helps to open up their economic potential. In addition to that, we said, let's start investing in programs that show that you can actually dramatically cut recidivism rates. Everybody from the Manhattan Institute to some philanthropists in our community to one gentleman from a corporation we honored last night stepped up and helped us create a fraternity. I wasn't in a fraternity at Stanford, but I wanted to be in one so badly, I decided to create my own, and it's called Delta Alpha Delta Sigma, DADS. And my mom wishes I would join the fraternity in a biological sense, but we created it for men coming home from prison. And we saw that guys coming home from prison, just like all men's natural instinct, wanted to be great dads, but they faced understandable barriers towards getting involved with their kids' lives. One is many of these men did not have model fathers to teach them how to do parenting. Number two is when they went to the mother of their children, one of the first things she might bring up, understandably as I would, is, wait a minute, you owed me thousands of dollars in child support payments that have been collecting in arrears while you were out in prison. We started seeing all the practical reasons that are out there that are disincentive for these men to do the right thing. And we said, let's get these guys in a program, put the men together with mentor dads, create parenting classes, bring the women in to talk about child support, but also co-parenting in a successful way, and also start talking about if your ambition is to be a great father, that's what we're coming together on. Intermediate to that is getting a job. Amazingly, this program right now has taken a 65% recidivism rate, between 60 and 65 in the state. And for this program, the recidivism rate wasn't cut in half or 2/3, it's at 7% right now. And this is in a down economy. And so what my team has seen time and time again in innovative ways is that we could break through some of the biggest problems in our communities in an evidence-based way. We're now doing veterans courts, community courts, drug courts, doing a lot of innovation in our criminal justice system with the help of philanthropy to show that if we change the system, we actually save money, but more important than money is we're actually reclaiming lives that otherwise would be lost to a system that's incredibly expensive, that if a kid goes in when they're 12 or 13 years old, likely they will continue to go in and out of the system. The last data I saw from Rikers Island was something like 83% recidivism rates for kids who will continue within that system through their adulthood and potentially to their death. I say all that to say that the critical, to me, difference-making money for us on all of our innovative programs. I remember we have a financial empowerment center in Newark where the average family that goes in there gets 10% more in income or benefits just by walking in the door and letting our team talk to them about everything from credit to the earned income tax credit. But the key thing I want to end with is just the area that is most critically needed in America, that ultimately is the great preventer of crime and poverty, which is ultimately the great preventer, to me, of the erosion of our democracy. That is in the area that I call this, in a very dramatic terms, the cancer that's on the soul of our democracy right now. And to me, I think it is the modern day slavery. If the slavery of the 1800s and 1700s, 1800s and before was a slavery of physical bondage, the slavery of today, in America at least, is a slavery where people are chained to limited options, where they're imprisoned by confined opportunities because of their failure to access great education. That is it. America is in deep trouble. The statistics are obvious. We've already fallen from number 1 in the globe in percentage of our population graduating from college to now number 9. We are falling back in percentage of graduates in STEM subjects. 6% of our graduates now graduate in engineering. Our competitor nations are at 12%. Mexico's at 15%, Germany 16%, Japan 20%. We have failed to heal the racial achievement gap in the country, which is one of our more shameful stories. And that is actually problematic. McKinsey, many of you know the 2009 study that they measured the impact of the racial achievement gap on our GDP. They measured it at 1.3 to $2.3 trillion. Well, 2 weeks ago, the Wall Street Journal had a bit of article about a momentous change in our nation, that the children being born as of this year in America, the majority of them are minority. Well, what's going to happen 20 years from now if that racial achievement gap continues? The majority of our workforce will be underachieving. In a global knowledge-based economy, this is a tremendous challenge to the success of our country, and will weigh down all of us and our GDP and our competitiveness. And so in Newark, the area where we're seeing the most innovation, the area where we're seeing many great corporate partners and philanthropists step up to join with community activists, to join with educators, to join with social entrepreneurs, is trying to find out how we in this space create transformation. And I'm not just talking about transforming the outcomes for a child. I'm not just talking about transforming the outcomes for a school. In fact, I'm happy that in my lifetime, we've banished that misperception that every child, no matter what their circumstances, can't learn. We now know, because we've shown we can take any child, put them in the right circumstances, they succeed. We now know we can do it in a school. I could take you to any city and show you a school with high poverty kids. Some of the schools, like we have in Newark, that are succeeding at these high levels don't even have kids where English, the majority of the kids don't have English spoken at their home. But the question no longer is, can we do a school, can we do a kid? The question now is, can we create a whole system, a whole public school system that serves every one of its children? And that is the battle that we're trying to fight in Newark. We know we can grow high-performing schools, but the question is, can I see the day in the United States of America that in any city, every single child has a pathway towards not mediocrity, because mediocrity won't cut it, and I'm not an American because I believe in mediocrity, that is a pathway towards excellence where they can cultivate their genius. And the innovative things that we're doing right now in Newark, talking about teacher pipelines, figuring out accountability systems for the professionals in education that are not punitive, but that are performance measures that actually empower people within their profession. Finding ways to banish this archaic agrarian model of education where kids come in at 1 hour and leave at another hour. That's not how we do it. That's not how you do it in the professional world. It should not how we do it in schools. All of these things right now are being worked on in our city. So I'm confident now that if America is going to figure this out, one of the laboratories for figuring that out will be in Newark, New Jersey. And so let me end with just one last comment. And it's just a personal note. I stand here today because of what my family has termed a conspiracy of love. Because my family made it very clear to me when I was growing up that everything I am is because people who I do not know, many of whom my parents don't know, came together in this grand conspiracy to make this democracy be who it says it was going to be. And to fast forward through that, my dad was born in the Deep South poor, and he would argue with that. I wasn't poor, boy. I was just P.O. I couldn't afford the other two letters. My father has a way of making his story sound so much more dramatic now that he's older. The weather patterns have shifted. He lived in a geographical anomaly that you walked uphill to school, walked uphill home. I don't know how that works. But the truth is that he was born young, black, poor to a single mother, like a lot of boys in my community are. His mother couldn't take care of him, so he was raised by his grandmother. I got about 11% of my kids being raised by their grandparents. His grandmama couldn't take care of him, and so the community took him in. In some ways, I see kids that the community does take them in, but it's not the community I want to be taking those kids in. My father then was put a roof over his head, food, people kept him in school, kept on him. He wasn't gonna go to college, he was gonna go work. They said, you're going to college, can't afford it. They put dollar bills in envelopes. My father had tears in his eyes this Thanksgiving when we were going around and saying, what are you thankful for? Putting dollar bills in envelopes, he said. He couldn't remember the people's names, but they allowed him to pay his first semester tuition at North Carolina Central University. Then at college, amazing things happened. My parents talk about that conspiracy of love. I was the commencement speaker for my mom's 50th reunion year at Fisk University, and I'll never forget, it was a room like this, dinner tables, and she's taking me around to tables saying, this is the woman who led our voter registration drive when it was dangerous to do so. You all remember Goodwin, Cheney, and Schwerner. She took me around and said, this is the person that led my boycott in my town. In our school. And I couldn't believe it. It was almost like she was saying, pay attention, Cory. This person struggled for you. This person protested for you. This person risked their life for you. The conspiracy of love continued when my parents got to Washington, D.C. Both college graduates, that's where they met, that's where they married. And corporations were not hiring black people. So blacks and whites and many innovative, forward-thinking people in corporations themselves worked with organizations like the Urban League to help blacks be hired for the first time. My father was one of the first blacks hired by an oil company, by a department store, and then the two of them started for a small tech firm that you all probably haven't heard of called IBM. And then the next thing you know, they're doing well at IBM, and they get promoted, and my father moves and my mom moved to New Jersey, can't find places in white neighborhoods that would sell them homes. So they went back to that conspiracy of love. Black people and white people came together through something called the Fair Housing Council in New Jersey. And they started a program where my parents would go out to a house. They were told it sold. They'd send a white couple after them, Mr. and Mrs. Brown, but they were not brown. They were white. And eventually my parents found a house they loved. They were told it was sold. The Browns went. It was still for sale. the Browns made a bid on the house for my parents. On the day of the closing, my father and a young Jewish lawyer, amazing young man, my father would say, came into the real estate agent's office, and the real estate agent was met by this young lawyer who said, "You are in violation of New Jersey Fair Housing Council law," and he had a great civil rights speech to give him, but the real estate agent wouldn't let him finish the speech because he just stood up and punched the guy in the face. And then he sicked a dog on my dad. And the size of the dog, by the way, has changed over time. My dad says it was Cujo. My mom will lean over and whisper to me, "It was just Toto, son. It was just Toto." Little small thing. But 4 years later, a little while later, after a big court case, my family moves into a town called Harrington Park, New Jersey. As my father used to call it, the 4 raisins in a tub of vanilla ice cream. And I would sit around this dinner table with parents that in one generation, cycles of poverty were broken. In one generation, cycles of not going to higher education were broken. In one generation, the kids got the greatest abundant opportunities that America could provide. And my brother and I would walk around, sometimes proud of us. We were both in the honor society. I was an all-American football player, and my dad would look at us and say, "Boy, don't you walk around here with your chest put out. Who do you think you are? You didn't hit a triple. You were born on third base, boy." And they would tell us, "You drink deeply from wells of freedom and liberty and opportunity that you did not dig. You eat lavishly from banquet tables that were prepared for you by your ancestors. And you could sit around here just consuming, getting dumb, fat, and happy, or you can let your blessings, the richness that you have inherited, metabolize within your spirit and fuel you to continue the fight for this democracy." This is the American culture I know. It's a culture that says that each one of us needs to fight our way to a more free America, and that freedom anywhere will always be jeopardized by a lack of freedom anywhere. And so we now have an obligation. We cannot let the base forms of our culture undermine this continued urgency. We cannot accept where we are now as a nation. We cannot accept children being born into communities where they do not have the ability to cultivate our nation's most greatest natural resource, which is their own genius. And we all need to live a level of urgency. I'm proud that in Newark, I see that level of urgency in the eyes of tenant leaders, in the eyes of community moms, in the eyes of volunteers, in the eyes of pastors and imams, in the eyes of the people in my business community who get it, who understand it. That we can really be, if we come together, if we live with those ideals and those values, that we can be the generation, and I'm audacious enough to believe this, that we can be the first generation to make real the words of our children spoken every day in classrooms around this country. We can indeed be a nation where we all live with liberty and justice for all. Thank you.